So, we had a Nintendo Direct today where Nintendo, of all companies, decided that they were going to be the ones at Summer Games Fest to drop information about Kingdom Hearts 4. Not what I expect. I didn't expect them to get that, but in fairness, the information we got about Kingdom Hearts 4 is that, yeah, it's Sora hitting Heartless with Keyblades, some Organization 13 bullshit with people in black raincoats, and the game is coming out on platforms eventually at some point. No release date, no actual information about it, just a reminder that the game remains alive and in development. Along with that, they also announced a Kingdom Hearts collection for episodes 1 through 3 of Kingdom Hearts, which is all coming to Switch 2 and is no longer going to be stuck behind that shitty-ass cloud version that worked so fucking bad. And you'll be able to play the games properly. That's wonderful. That's a lovely thing to be able to have for people who want to play Kingdom Hearts on a handheld system. That collection is being advertised by Nintendo and by Square using this illustration, a couple of different variations of it, but these illustrations in general, and people have been getting a little bit worried about them because if you zoom in, for example, on the clock tower here in the background, and you look at some of the details on it, that looks a little melty. That looks a little not quite right, doesn't it? That looks a little incorrect, and so people have been wondering, holy shit, is this fucking generated with fucking generative fucking AI? For fuck's sake. And as far as I can tell from examining these illustrations, there is not really any good evidence of generative AI being used to generate these pieces. It's credible to think so, though. Like, people don't think so for no reason. Squaresoft have been publicly bragging about incorporating generative AI into every aspect of their workflow. This is something they have been very proud to say that they're doing, something that they're very proud to say that they're pursuing, because there has never been a tech grift in the history of the universe that Square Enix has not looked at and immediately wanted to get in on. Remember when they sold Tomb Raider so they could spend that money really investing very heavily in NFTs? Yeah, it's that company. So the good old suits at Square Enix have definitely been incorporating AI into their production processes, and they've been ordering everyone who works at the company to make use of it whether they want to or not, because generative AI is being sold on the myth of infinite growth forever. That if you incorporate generative AI into your process, eventually you're going to see productivity skyrocket by 500 billion thousand % forever, infinity money forever, and you're going to be paying so much less in payroll, you're going to be able to fire so many people, and the line is going to go up so much. And so the directive that comes down from the C-suite is incorporate generative AI into everything, use it for everything in all aspects of the company, and keep doing that until these infinite gains materialize and manifest themselves. That's more or less how things are in the games industry right now. You'll occasionally see when a company gets caught out for putting genAI bullshit in their thing, that some aggrieved person at that company will be like, well, everyone's using generative AI, they're just lying about how much they're using it. That's pretty much true. Companies are lying about how much they're using it because every single tech brain CEO dipshit motherfucker on the face of the earth is mandating that they must use this technology because it is for sure 100% we've been promised definitely that it'll increase productivity 10 billion % and make us all incredibly rich. So yeah, there is a lot more of it being used in the industry that we think, and we've probably all been fooled by it. But in this instance, I don't think the Twilight Town clock tower here in the background is genAI, because what I think this is a 3D model. If you look at the way the lighting falls on the bells and things here, I think this is a 3D model that they put into Photoshop and had someone put like the standard Photoshop pencil filter over it or something like that, or maybe a generative AI filter of some kind. But I think it's a 3D model that they put into a program and told us like, hey, make this 3D model look like an illustration, and then that introduced a bunch of compression and upscaling artifacts that made this shit look weird. But I think it's just a 3D model. I think it's very much the same case for Castle Oblivion here in the background, because that doesn't really look like generative AI creation to me. And also, I don't know what generative AI engine would create something like Castle Oblivion correctly from this turned angle. I think this is a 3D model that they put through some filters to make it look vaguely like an illustration, and then they just slapped it into the background of this thing. Because what the background of this particular advertising illustration says to me more than anything is laziness. Because if you look at this, is presumably supposed to be like Destiny's Islands or whatever, right? Sora's home. But if you look at what's actually in here, this is a bunch of default Photoshop brushes that are just sort of like vaguely over like a over like a blue square, and then you and a gradient, and then some sky cloud things with some orange on it over the top there. And it's exactly the same with the background in here. It's exactly the same with the background in here. It's exactly the same with the background in here. All the skies are exactly the same, which, like, that's a Kingdom Hearts thing. Oh, we're all looking at the same sky, but they all look like shit. They all look like lazy fucking garbage made by someone who could not be bothered to spend more than 2.5 minutes just generating a background with a default cloud brush or fucking whatever. It looks cheap and it looks lazy for the most part. And the background elements, like this building, like Castle Oblivion, like the clock tower, I think are just 3D models that they slapped in there and put some Photoshop filters over them, or some genAI filters maybe, to make them look basically kind of like an illustration, and that's it. So I don't think the backgrounds were made with any amount of genAI. I think they were just made cheaply and lazily by someone who didn't give a fuck, or maybe more likely someone who wasn't paid enough to give a fuck. That leads us on to the character illustrations. So, the frontmost Sora, this one, I believe this is a genuine Tetsuya Nomura illustration of Sora. I don't think it's a very good one. I think it's a slightly... It feels like a slightly rushed one that maybe we should have spent a few more times with some revisions or whatever. This one, I believe, is 100% genuine. There's some few odd bits, like the way that Sora's thumb folds over itself here. It just kind of... I don't know how you're supposed to turn your thumb like that. When you ball your hand up into a fist with the thumb out in front, usually the thumb is going to come in over it more like that. This kind of looks like he's managed to somehow fold at a 90-degree angle, only like the last joint of his thumb, which is like, but that's a mistake or an illustration thing that a human artist could very easily do. The detail and the way that this illustration is put together, to me, this all looks just like, yeah, this is just an illustration. That's probably Tetsuya Nomura's own artwork. But then we look at the rest of them. And in order to understand what's going on here, I think it's illustrative to look at Goofy here first, because Goofy looks credibly like Goofy, right? Like, that looks like a Disney version of Goofy. His Kingdom Hearts bits look a little bit, I don't know, they look fine, more or less. They look a little bit odd, not 100% consistent, but like, yeah, and the hand, I've seen Disney artists draw Goofy's hand like that before. It's weird and lumpy with this thing in the middle, but it's not that unusual. It's just turned a bit weird, and there seems to be these weird compression artifacts around the side for some reason that I don't really understand why they're there. It looks alright, maybe a little bit bad, but someone on Blue Sky Googled Goofy jumping, and found this, which I think goes a long way towards explaining why Goofy just looks a bit weird and inconsistent here. It's because this is a trace job. Someone grabbed an illustration of Goofy from somewhere on Google Images or fucking whatever, and just kind of traced his Kingdom Hearts clothes over it, and turned the hand, weirdly, for some fucking reason, in a way that didn't quite make sense. That's why the fingers look a little bit odd and weird. No generative AI required. Or, I don't know, fuck it. Like, I don't know if generative AI models can do this, but maybe it's take this illustration, put it in, and say, tell the generative AI model to put him in the Kingdom Hearts Goofy clothes. I don't know if that's possible. I don't think so. But this is not really so much a case of generative AI as it's a case of someone doing a bad job tracing a different illustration and trying to paint the Kingdom Hearts bits into it. And that, I think, can inform how we approach Donald as well. Because Donald also looks kind of bad. There's some weird details about him, like the way that the whole inside of his mouth is orange. That's not usually how Donald is rendered. The way that his beak kind of folds into and merges into itself over here. The way that his expression is a little bit inconsistent from side to side. It just looks a little bit off. And especially something I notice is that his hand is really weird. Now, another thing that's happening in this illustration, you can't see it, but behind Sora over here, Donald has 5 fingers on this hand, which he's not supposed to. He's supposed to have 4 fingers. But that's a mistake that a human artist can very easily make. That's a mistake that human artists make all the time. That's a mistake that official Disney artists make all the time. What's more notable to me is that Donald is holding his staff from Kingdom Hearts, except no, he's not actually holding his staff. If you pay attention to how the staff is settled in his hand, he's not holding on to it. In order to hold on to something, you wrap your fingers around it That's what holding something means. But Donald isn't doing that. Donald's fingers are all the way out here, away from the staff, not curled around it, not actually holding onto the mass of it. Only his thumb is kind of wrapped around it, and the staff is just sitting kind of loose in his palm, which is, again, a very human way to do a bad job of rendering someone holding onto a staff. I've made that mistake when I was a younger artist. But it's a weird thing, because the staff itself, if you look at it, it's like really complete with a lot of detail, like including like the little squirgly like thing, and it's like drawn from below, which is a fairly complex angle. They do a pretty good job of that. So why, if they are able to do such a good job of drawing the details of the staff from this weird angle, can they not make the staff look like Donald is actually holding onto it? Well, I suspect, I'm just gonna go out on a limb and guess, that they Googled an illustration of Donald Duck that sort of broadly had the right pose, and then they grabbed a 3D model of Donald's staff and just kind of traced over that and sort of vaguely placed it in his hand and did a bad job at it. My suspicion of what's happened here is that that's what's happened, is that exactly like the Goofy thing, they've just kind of badly traced the Kingdom Hearts bits. They just badly traced the illustration, put the Kingdom Hearts bits over it, and kind of called it a day, which is why you get inconsistent details like the line weight on the pockets on Donald's suit here. The colors are a little bit weird and off. It's because it's something, quick work done by someone who didn't really give a shit about what they were doing, for the most part. That, I think, would also go some way towards explaining why two of the Soras look really weird and bad. This frontmost Sora looks fine. That looks like a reasonably high-quality illustration of the kind that Tetsuya Nomura would make. Like, you have the little detail of his Kingdom Hearts keychain with the little crown symbol, right, that makes up the keychain. That's a Tetsuya Nomura thing with the belt and all of that shit. There's some things about, like, I don't know 100% if I buy the foreshortening of, like, the head into the torso. The torso looks maybe a little bit small, partly because the legs are so big on the pantsuit that Sora is wearing and shit like that. But it looks like a credible, probably an original Tetsuya Nomura illustration. Not so sure if that's the case for the other two illustrations, though. For the other two illustrations, things start to get wonky and kind of weird. Kingdom Hearts 2 Sora, for example, that hand looks odd. Right? That doesn't look quite right. Like, Sora in the game, he wears these huge gloves that make his hands quite big, because that, again, same with his giant shoes, helps to match him to the proportions of a Disney character and sort of helps him fit in to the aesthetic of Kingdom Hearts, right? He's been getting more and more sort of realistic, air quotes, more and more of an anime pretty boy as the series has gone on, but that's the thing. But, like, the gloves don't, like, physically move his knuckles apart from one another. What's being implied here is that one knuckle is here and here and here and here on his hand. And, like, they're just spread apart too far. It looks weird and wonky and bad. And again, my suspicion is that this Sora illustration is traced and put together from perhaps some official Kingdom Hearts artwork from somewhere, or maybe a 3D model that they're using, or some other illustration that they found on Google Images and just kind of traced over. Because what it feels like to me, looking at this thing, is that they probably found an illustration of a fairly realistic person being foreshortened like this, or used a 3D model or whatever, and traced over that. And then they tried to draw Kingdom Hearts details on it, and it just ended up looking off and weird. Sora's head here doesn't look like it actually belongs on his body. It kind of looks like they copy-pasted a Sora head and just kind of moved it. Like, just kind of moved it in on top and then traced over it. It looks off. It doesn't look quite right, because the proportionality of Sora's head size, which is like more or less like this, right? And then his torso, which is like more or less the same size as his torso, in a way that just doesn't fit the proportions of the rest of his body. Especially how small his feet are. And it's the thing of, like, this Sora here and this Sora here have the same pose, right? It's exactly the same fucking pose that they have. Not drawn correctly. Like, they changed the detail that he's holding the keyblade up over his shoulder here, but it's the same exact pose, right? It's Sora, one knee out, one knee down, and then poking upwards towards the thing. And then they changed it so that his keyblade goes over his shoulder and just kind of disappears. I think his keyblade is long enough that it should actually sort of be out here, but, like, fuck it, whatever. It looks like they partly traced this illustration and then did a bad job of editing Kingdom Hearts 2 details on top of it. In fact, looking at the two hands, yeah, I don't know, man. Like it looks a little bit like they took this goofy bit, like with the big bulge here, and then took this illustration and sort of tried to merge them together. Like even the thumb here kind of has that same structure, doesn't it? Holy fuck, I think... No fucking way. I didn't actually see this before, but... Did they just... Oh my fucking god, I think they did this. I think they just kind of did this to it. I think they traced over Goofy's hand, maybe, for this? I don't know. I can't be 100% sure. Hard to prove, but it looks weird, right? Like, the proportions of this hand just look weird and off, is the point I'm trying to get at. And this hand doesn't look like the same kind of hand as the one down behind here. I think this is the same thing. And I think it's also the reason why the third Sora from Kingdom Hearts 3 looks so fucking weird. Because the idea here is that Sora is foreshortened out this way, right? Like he's poking his leg out towards the camera, like in this sort of way, right? Like, and it's being foreshortened into the camera. It's becoming really large in frame and things like that. Okay, cool. So we have like a foreshortening that's supposed to go like this way, right? Like where the vanishing point is somewhere down this way, right? That's sort of what we're supposed to do. Okay, fair enough. It looks wrong, though. His leg looks, first of all, way the fuck too long. It looks like it's 3 miles longer than the other leg. It doesn't foreshorten quite correctly as it leads into his hips here. It's like, if he's pushing his leg that much forward towards the camera, I'm sort of making the gesture with my body, you can't see that, then his hip should be turned a little bit, right? So that like the ball of his hip joint is like outwards towards like towards the cylinder of the leg, but it's not. That hip is like completely fucking straight front on, as though he's not it's a weird turn of the hip. It doesn't look quite right. It doesn't quite fit together. The lines and like the folds in the clothes also look just a little bit, it just looks messy. Like it doesn't necessarily look AI generated or whatever, but it looks messy. It looks wrong. There's little details, like in Kingdom Hearts 3 on Sora's shoes, right? Like these little button things, these little things on the bottom of shoes are actually this symbol, again, like the Kingdom Hearts heart, like crown symbol that Tetsuya Nomura loves to put into the character design all over the place. And so it's weird that that's not here, but again, I rather suspect that what was done here was someone photo bashed together a trace over some other illustration and tried their best just to layer Kingdom Hearts shit on top of that, which is why Sora's other arm looks so completely fucked up. What the fuck is going on here? Sora wears big gloves, right? Like, we've established this. Sora wears large gloves, but those large gloves, like, they go maybe halfway down his forearm at most, right? They go maybe halfway down his forearm. At most, when he's wearing them. They don't go all the way down to his fucking elbow. This thing looks like a baseball catcher's mitt, and the way that, like, this tiny little forearm here is supposed to balloon out and make hands that are, like, that fucking large, like he's Alex Kidd in Wonderland. That's an old reference for very old people. Like, why the fuck is the hand that big? Because it looks like what they're trying to do is the hand is supposed to be also going towards the camera, right? It's also supposed to be foreshortening, like he's holding it out close towards the camera so it gets distorted into the camera lens. But that doesn't make any sense because the leg is getting bigger because it's poking all the way out here, but the hand is going that way. He's holding the hand up and the elbow is pushing his hand backwards. So it should be getting smaller in frame, not larger in frame. So it looks completely fucking wrong. The artist has tried to draw the large gloves on Sora, but has not had any understanding whatsoever of the structure of it. And again, I suspect has just kind of tried to trace over some shit and done a really piss poor job. Same thing with Sora's hairstyle, right? Sora has a pretty consistent hairstyle across all 3 games. But, like, whereas this illustration, which I think is a genuine Nomura illustration, does, like, the Kingdom Hearts 1 version. This one does the Kingdom Hearts 2 version. This one... What the fuck is that? Like, how the fuck is there a fringe pointing downwards up here? That looks like a haystack. It looks really messy and bad and wrong, and he's missing the actual big hair spikes that sort of define Sora's hairstyle. Like, it's not AI generated necessarily. It just looks bad. It just looks bad because I think this was bashed together from multiple different photo references that were poorly traced over, and then they tried to draw the Kingdom Hearts outfit on top of it and just did a piss poor job of it. So, like, maybe there was some AI upscaling happening with some of these illustrations, right? Like, maybe there's some AI upscaling happening with these, like, 3D model things in the background with the Photoshop filters over them or fucking whatever. Maybe they AI filtered them. Maybe, like, it's not impossible. Unlikely, but it's not impossible that the way that these illustrations came about is that the artist used generative AI to create a reference, right? Like, make me a reference of a character poking their hand out in front or fucking whatever, or a character kicking their leg forward or whatever. That's not impossible, and then they traced over them and did a bad job, and that's why it ends up looking so wonky. But no, like, most of the mistakes that I see here are just the mistakes of a perfectly ordinary human illustrator who's not really good at what they're trying to do, who doesn't really understand the fundamental underlying structure of the illustrations that they're trying to create, and who's just kind of bashing shit together or tracing over whatever they can find on Google Images and doing a bad job, right? So no, I don't think this is generative AI necessarily. I don't think we can necessarily tell either. One thing I do want to get across about generative AI, you have been fooled by generative AI before, and you're going to be fooled by it again. I've been fooled by it before. I'm going to be fooled by it again. And the problem is, we know when we don't get fooled. When we don't get fooled, we spot it and we go, aha, generative AI, you can't fool me, I can tell. But you don't know when you do get fooled. When you do get fooled, you see it, you don't notice, and you go on your way. So you get a lot of data telling you, I can tell when something is AI generated because I was able to tell that time and that time and that time and that time and that time. You don't get a lot of data that tells you when you can't tell. That's relatively rare, so you get this skewed perception in your brain of how good you are at spotting it. And certainly I have had that, and I think pretty much everyone does. And we all have to get used to the idea that we can't necessarily tell at a glance when something is AI generated. Sometimes, when an illustration looks wonky and weird and wrong, it's not because generative AI was used to create it. It's because a lazy artist did a bad job stealing from somewhere or tracing over something in a way that makes the illustration look a little bit uncanny, but it's not uncanny because an AI generated it. It's uncanny because a human being that who didn't understand exactly what they were doing created it by doing a bad job at their work. And I think that's what's been happening with this particular illustration. I don't think it's all AI generated, even though we know that Square Enix is integrating generative AI into their development process. I think this is just an example of really cheap, badly made, lazy garbage being produced by a corporation that could not be bothered to do any kind of quality assurance on the marketing materials that they're using to try and push for an entry into a major franchise under their aegis. Why am I hiccuping right now? God damn. I think Square Enix should be fucking embarrassed. First of all, to be stealing from the Disney Corporation. That's not something you usually get away with. They should be embarrassed to be stealing from the Disney Corporation. They must have somewhere in their library of assets the ability to create something that looks better than this. They should be embarrassed at that. They should be embarrassed at putting this shit out without doing quality control on it. And also, just, like, this is another thing. It's also just bad graphic design because, like, what they're trying to do, right, for this thing, we're trying to have a triangle composition here, right? Like, where we have all these characters that sort of lead up towards a point, and then, like, at the point of it, there's the title, and we're sort of like, okay, cool. It's supposed to be sort of a pyramid triangle composition like this, but if you actually take a look at it, you have here with Donald and the one ugly Sora here, it does sort of do a reasonably good straight line sort of down along them there, which is like one side of the triangle, but then you get over here, and it's like, well, no, there's not really a line you can sort of, around the Goofy and the other Sora. There, it's more like this. It's like a curve like this. So what you get is a fairly good sort of sloped triangular composition shape over here. And then you just sort of get this wonk here, which makes the whole thing is unbalanced visually, right? Like this Sora over here should really be striking more of a triangular pose like that to round out this corner of the triangle, and he's not doing that. Instead, he and Goofy are both kind of curving the composition in like that, so you get this lumpy, uneven, sloped D shape almost out of it, which is just not. It doesn't look very good. It doesn't look balanced. It looks really inconsistent with the fucking random assemblage of squares that they've got happening in the background. It's really bad graphic design. This is bad graphics design that you should kind of be embarrassed to put on your major franchise video game advertisement. It's really bad illustration work. It's inconsistent, and it fits poorly together. Another thing, by the way, again, talking about bad like graphic design, right? When you have an assemblage of characters that are all supposed to sort of fit together, right? Like all of these characters are sort of supposed to fit together in the center of this illustration, like they're all sort of like, oh, they're all doing the same thing or whatever. One thing you should not do is have the characters drawn in completely different perspectives, because the frontmost Sora here is drawn sort of in this kind of perspective, right? Like they have vanishing point somewhere down here, and then we have perspective out like that, because he's been seen from the top down and he's foreshortening like that into the camera, right? But Goofy isn't. Goofy is seen straight on. Like the vanishing point for Goofy is somewhere like straight behind him. Like he's not being seen from a top-down perspective. He's not being distorted into the camera. Goofy is a flat, neutral illustration, as we can see right the fuck here. So those two don't match up together, and so what you get is a Goofy who looks like he's kind of straight on and who's not being distorted by the camera at all, behind a character who looks a lot smaller than him, looks like he should be further away from the camera than Goofy, and yet this Sora is in front of that Goofy, even though that Goofy looks like he's closer to the camera. That looks fucked, right? Then we have the frontmost Sora, who also has this kind of vanishing point, right? Like he's also like growing larger into the camera this way, and then vanishing towards a vanishing point somewhere down in this direction. Okay, but this Sora isn't. This Sora is being foreshortened in this direction instead, right? Like pushing into the camera in sort of a this kind of angle. So those two angles completely mismatch each other as well, but this Sora, even though this Sora's leg is pushing forward out of the screen towards the camera, and this Sora's legs are receding away from the camera towards a vanishing point down here, this Sora is still in front of that Sora. Even though this is supposed to push away and this is supposed to put toward, and that just looks bad, right? And neither of them are drawn in the same foreshortening or perspective as either Donald or Goofy, and that's just bad graphic design. Like, you don't want to put shit together like that. And I cannot understand how, if they were cheap and lazy and didn't want to make original artwork for the Kingdom Hearts Collection 1, 2, 3, why didn't they just go into their archive of concept art? They have 500 billion tons of concept art from Kingdom Hearts in their archives somewhere that they could just slap some of that together, some illustrations that are like sort of vaguely from the same perspective or whatever, slap that shit together over the cover art for the 3 games, or just use the cover art for the 3 games, and that would have been fine, instead of taking these mismatched, really poorly composited assets, one of which is just straight up traced from I'm 100% sure Donald is exactly the same thing, one of which is just straight up stolen from Disney, and slap them together poorly over this cheap, garbo-ass, ugly Photoshop pencil filter, fucking cheapest 5-minute paint job of a skyline I have ever seen in my goddamn life. Frontmost Sora with this ugly-ass, like, medium opacity, white feathered outline that sort of makes him stand out from the rest of the illustrations in a really weird way. Why not use, you have 500 million Kingdom Hearts asset in your library. Why would you do this? The lazy thing to do is just use assets you already have instead of badly generating new assets that look like shit together. Square Enix should be fucking embarrassed. They should be fucking embarrassed of this. Tetsuya Nomura should be embarrassed to have what I assume is his actual real work, this one, I think is his actual real work, presented alongside a traced drawing, and these really ugly-ass bad drawings of Sora, this really poorly constructed illustration of Donald, and then I can't really see the whole illustration of Mickey back there, but I'm sure it has its problems as well, against a backdrop that looks like this. He should be embarrassed to have his work his good illustration work, his skill, his technical proficiency presented alongside this cheap bottom of the garbage bin, like the bargain bin at GameStop in 2008 ass shitty, cheap fucking someone's PowerPoint presentation at a job they don't care about ass ugly piece of graphic design. So yeah, I don't think it's generative AI. Looking at it more closely, I think it's just cheap and lazy and no quality control and no effort and no expense being spent creating it at all. I think that's why it looks like shit. But oh my god, does it look like shit. Squaresoft should be embarrassed.